Hello. Now we are counting down. We're nearly there. So today, number 4, the best ever player taken with that pick in the history of the VFL AFL draft, 1986 to 2021. So far, previously on My Blue Heaven, a bit of a recap. Dangerfield the best at 10, Pike the best at 9, Bartel the best at 8, Selwood the best at 7, McRae the best at 6, and Franklin the best at 5. And I've reworked that. And Pike goes out to 10, McRae goes out to 9, Bartel remains in 8, Dangerfield goes down from 10 to 7, Franklin goes up from 5 to 6, and Selwood has slipped down from 7 to 5. Okay. Yeah, a little bit of a weakness up the top there, I reckon. Just looking at that, Pike and McRae. To think someone like Scott Pendlebury, who was selection number 5 and was up against Lance Franklin. Yeah, it just doesn't look right, does it? Where you got Pike and McRae. No disrespect to those two, though. They were really good footballers. Now, selection number 4. We'll start with the not-so-notables right back until 1986. Interesting player, Richard Anderson from South Australia. Drafted to Richmond and decided to never take up the offer and decided to remain in South Australia and become a teacher. There you go. So the first draft, 1986, a top 10 draft pick said, nah, I'm not coming to Victoria. I'm going to stay in South Australia and become a school teacher. 1987, Andrew Brockhurst, another South Australian, went to Fitzroy, 38 games in 3 seasons with the Lions. 1988, John McNamara didn't play a game for North Melbourne. He was from Port Fairy. 1991, the father of Jeremy McGovern and Mitch McGovern, who are both current players. Obviously, Jeremy at West Coast Eagles, premiership player, and Mitch McGovern is currently at Carlton. Well, their old man played. I mean, I actually didn't even know this. I had no idea. I remember Andrew McGovern. I actually remember him. From Claremont, went to Sydney, played 20 games in 2 seasons with the Swans, went back to WA, and then played 63 games with Fremantle. And he was one of the inaugural players. And he followed his waffle coach, Jared Neesham, to Fremantle. So he played 83 games overall. I had no idea. Now, yeah, I mean, obviously, they're talented footballers, those 2 boys. I didn't realise their father played. No idea about that. Anyway, 1993, Glenn Gorman from the Geelong Falcons. He went to Sydney and didn't play a game at the Swans. Then went to North Melbourne and managed 2 games there before being delisted. 1995, Scott Bamford from North Adelaide. Fitzroy. He was one of the players who was invited to go up when Fitzroy folded, to go to Brisbane, the merger. Fitzroy and the Brisbane Bears merged. He was one of the ones who went up there. So he played 59 games and kicked 33 goals, playing for Fitzroy, Brisbane, and then the Cats. Spent a few years at Kardinia Park. 1996, Mark Kinnear, who was drafted to the Sydney Swans with selection number 4. Played 6 games for the Swans in 2 seasons, but then was traded to the Collingwood Football Club in 1999 and didn't play a game there because he decided to retire even before the season 2000 even began. So he retired in the pre-season or over the pre-season. 1998, Ryan Fitzgerald, South Australian. Big guy, about 199 centimetres, kicked 23 goals in 18 games for both Sydney and Adelaide. Had shoulder reconstruction and ACL reconstruction in his short time in the AFL. Kicked 5 goals
on debut for the Sydney Swans, but his AFL career didn't last very long at all. But we all know Fitzy now. In his post-career, he's made a really good career for himself, both on television, first in Big Brother, I think it was, where he got his name, and now in both television and radio. 2000, quite a famous name now at the Carlton Football Club, because we've drafted so many, I'm not going to call them duds, but so many flops. One of the biggest ones was Luke Livingston. We mentioned Murray Vance as well, but Luke Livingston came to the football club with huge raps as a key position defender. Selection number 4, boy from Kerrang, Bendigo under-18s. Ended up playing 46 games in 6 seasons. It's a long time to be at a football club. Showed some okay signs. Came through in a really, really dark period at the Carlton Football Club. Mind you, there wasn't a lot of leadership there and a lot of development. Ended up becoming a really, really good VFL player. At both ends as well. He could play back and go forward. But huge disappointment for Carlton, Luke Livingston. Let's continue on with the not-so-notables. Another really disappointing player, mostly because of injury. He was the son of now, I think he's the football manager at St Kilda, Jeff Welsh. I might be wrong, but he's been around the traps, Jeff Welsh, Collingwood, North Melbourne. He's a really well-known football administrator. Well, his son, Tim Welsh, was drafted to the Western Bulldogs in 2002. But he was, as I said, he was cruel by injuries and only played the one game and kicked 1 goal. 2007, Carl Morton from Claremont went to Melbourne. He was a big, tall, skinny, rangy midfielder. Played 76 games at both the D's and then the Eagles, but only played 3 games in his home state, delisted after 6 years in the AFL. 2009, very, very talented Anthony Morabito, Western Australian, Fremantle. I'm not quite sure how many ACL injuries he had. I think it may have been 4. But he played 26 games in 7 seasons, and it was a stop-start career. Could not get on the park. Disappointing because he could play. 2012, a flop for the D's was Jimmy Toumpas from South Australia. In fact, it was more than a flop. It was a disaster. Played just 27 games for Melbourne. Traded to Port Adelaide, not much better there. 37 games overall in 6 seasons. They listed in 2018. 2014, Jared Pickett, Western Australian small forward. GWS, Sauce, got him to the Giants. Didn't play a game in 2 seasons there. Traded to Carlton once Sauce came to the Blues. He wanted Jared Pickett to come over. Showed a few signs in his short time at Carlton. Ended up playing 17 games and kicked 8 goals. Did his PCL quite badly, actually, in the pre-season of 2019. And just didn't make it back, put a lot of weight on, and then Carlton released him. So 5 years on an AFL list, Jared Pickett. Let's go to the notable mentions. And what a way to start. 1989, Peter Matera. Wowee. Could he play? Couldn't he light a football ground up? 1992, grand final. His performance in that game. Norm Smith medalist, 253 games, and he destroyed Geelong, kicking 5 goals in that game. 2-time premiership player in 92 and 94 in that powerful West Coast Eagles team. One of the greatest Indigenous players of all time, maybe the best. 5-time All-Australian, West Coast Eagles best and fairest. And one of those players who went from wing, where he was so dominant, to becoming one of the most dominant attacking halfback flankers in the competition later on in his career. 1990, Jason McCartney. What a story. I'm actually watching it, that I think it's on Stan, the story of Bali and the bombings, and it's yeah, it's brutal watching that. And Jason McCartney features in that series. And what a comeback. He originally drafted to Collingwood with selection number 4 in 1990. Then went to Adelaide, then went to North Melbourne, and ended up playing 107 games, and missed out on was it the 1999 grand final because of suspension? I think it may have been, and missed out at Adelaide as well. Wasn't part of their 97 and 98. I don't know how that all panned out, but I do remember him missing that 99 grand final because of suspension. 1992, a great of the Brisbane Lions Football Club, Justin Lepich, who started when they were the Bears, ended up playing 227 games, 194. Originally from Victoria, 3 times premiership defender, mostly at centre-half back, although he did start his career forward. He was the Brisbane's leading goal kicker in 97 and 98. 3-time All-Australian and Best and Fairest winner in 1999 at the Brisbane Lions. Another superstar and often forgotten, Scott Lucas, 1994, Camperdown, Geelong Falcons to Essendon and part of the Twin Towers with Matthew Lloyd. Premiership player in 2000, 2-time Best and Fairest winner, 270 games and 471 goals for the Bombers. 1997, and another Essendon player, Mark Bolton, key position, defender, a little bit forward, sometimes won 24 games in 10 seasons at Windy Hill. Was a little bit too young to play. I think it was his 3rd season, a little bit too young to play in Essendon's 2000 grand final team. 2001, Graham Pollack, his career or his time in the AFL, it was sort of came to an end with that sort of nasty incident where he was hit by a tram and had to be put into an induced coma. Started off at Fremantle, selection number 4, played 73 games there, traded to Richmond, played a further 38 for the Tigers for a total of 111 games. It wasn't quite the same after that incident in 2008. Farron Ray, Western Australian winger, halfback flanker, went to the Dogs, big raps on him. Didn't quite hit his straps there though, 75 games, but played really well when he went to St Kilda under Ross Lyon, who got the best out of him. Played a further 123 games at the Saints, including 2 losing grand finals and a draw. Went to North later on in his career as well as a rookie, but only played 4 games at Argent Street. Overall, he ended up playing 209 games. 2004, Richard Tambling. He's in the notable mentions because he played 124 games. I mean, we all know the story of Richard Tambling. Richmond picked him up at 4 instead of Buddy Franklin, who went to Hawthorn. Snatched Buddy up at pick 5. It's always been spoken about. And he had some injuries in 6 seasons at Richmond. Ended up being traded to Adelaide for a 1st and 3rd round draft pick. So they gave a fair bit up for him, the Crows. But he only added a further 16 games at Adelaide. One of the all-time greats at the West Coast Eagles, Josh Kennedy. You know the story. Started at Carlton with selection number 4. Northampton, which is now becoming such a famous football breeding ground in Western Australia. Paddy Cripps obviously is there as well. Well, Josh Kennedy came to the Blues, spent a couple of years at Carlton, played 22 games. He was skinny, he was raw, but he was showing a lot in the small time at Princes Park. But the Blues, they wanted Chris Judd. They wanted him to come back to Victoria, and Judd chose Carlton, and Carlton had to pay up big, real big. I think they offered up Paul Bauer, a Western Australian, but the Eagles said, no, thank you. We want Josh Kennedy. And what And they pressed really hard for Josh Kennedy, and what a decision it was by the West Coast Eagles because, yeah, as I mentioned, he's become one of the greats of the West Coast Eagles Football Club. Recently retired, clocked up 279 games and kicked 723 goals, becoming the all-time leading goal kicker at the Eagles, surpassing Peter Sumich. Premiership player in 2018, so we got his premiership medallion. 8-time leading goal kicker, 2 times Coleman medalist, 3-time All-Australian, and 3-time Glendenning Allen medalist. That is Josh Kennedy. Let's continue on with notable mentions. Matthew Leuenberger from East Perth. Went to Brisbane, Ruckman, 108 games for the Lions, traded to Western, played a further 29, 137 overall. Lots of injuries at both clubs. Actually retired from the game and had a contract on the table from the Bombers at the time, but decided to retire. 2008, Hamish Hartlett, South Australian, who got to stay in his home state his whole career when Port Adelaide picked him up as selection number 4. Played 193 games. Definitely had an ACL reconstruction in that time. Great kick of the football, penetrating kick-off halfback for Port Adelaide. 2010, Andrew Gaff, Victorian Oakley Chargers, went to the Eagles. Still playing, prolific wingman in 252 games. 2-time All-Australian, Eagles Best and Fairest winner in 2015. But unfortunately for Andrew Gaff, he's always going to be remembered for that unsavoury off-the-ball incident in a derby against Fremantle when he knocked out, he hammered young Andrew Brayshaw and broke his jaw and ended up copping 8 weeks, and in the process didn't play in the Eagles 2018 Premiership team. What a tragedy. 2011, Will Hoskin-Elliott, North Sunshine boy, Western Jets, went to the Giants in the inaugural season, 52 games at the Giants, wanted to come home, traded to Collingwood in 2016. Has played 129 games now. He's played 129 games at Collingwood overall. He's played 181, mostly as a forward. He's kicked 159 goals. Still playing, as I mentioned, was part of Collingwood's heartbreaking loss to the Eagles in the 2018 Grand Final. 2013, Marcus Bontempelli, tracking to be one of the best ever at the Whitten Oval, and I mean tracking. 191 games and 178 goals. Premiership player already in 2016. 4 times All-Australian. AFL Coaches Association Champion Player of the Year in 2019. Lee Matthews Trophy 221. And 4 times Dogs Best and Fair. Has been captain of the Western Bulldogs Football Club since 2020. 2015, another superstar. He's already there. Clayton Oliver could be one of the best ever at Melbourne, the way he's going. From Mooroopna, near Shepparton, Melbourne picked him up as a bit of a chunky lad, midfielder, sort of exploded into the top 10. 147 games, but listen to this resume that he's building. Premiership player in 221, two times AFL Coaches Association Player of the Year, 3 times All-Australian already, and already he has 4 best and fairest. 4 best and fairest at Melbourne, and that's pretty bloody decent considering the likes of Petrarca and Gawn and Viney. Some quality footballers at the Melbourne Football Club. Newbies, 2016, Ben Ainsworth, Gold Coast Suns. I reckon he's handy forward. 88 games already, 71 goals. Don't know whether he's a pick 4, though. Time will tell, though. 2017, Luke Davies-Uniacke. He looks every bit, a little bit slow to get going, but he looks every bit a top 4, top 5 prospect. North Melbourne, played 56 games. 2018, the same with Max King. 53 games, 98 goals, St Kilda. 2019, Lachlan Ash, GWS. Katandra, just the 25 games, but you would expect now, coming into, his 4th season on an AFL list, that he'd be just ready to start exploding. Lachlan Ash. 220, Logan McDonald, Western Australian, picked up by Sydney, key position forward, shown a little bit at the Swans. Had some really good games and some really quiet ones, including a quiet final, and he was dropped for this year's grand final team. 2021. It's going to be fascinating to see how this player tracks. 221. Pick number 4, father and son, Nick Dacos. Collingwood played all 25 games in 2022 for the Pies, and he was the Rising Star winner. He looks the goods. Best ever. When you have Matera, Lucas, Lepic, Gaff, Kennedy, Bont, Oliver, then you look down the newbies and see the likes of Luke Davies, Uniac, Max King, and Nick Dacos. It must be someone pretty special. And maybe in the future, if you did this in 10 years' time, maybe one of those newbies could push up to be the best ever, selection number 4. But the best ever, 1999 Matthew Pavlich, Fremantle. Picked him up with selection number 4. South Australian from Woodville, West Torrens. Now, Matthew Pavlich, and this is the swings and roundabouts guys of the draft. Pavlich had actually nominated for the draft in 1998, but was overlooked by all clubs, most notably the clubs in his home state of South Australia. Now, Adelaide instead drafted 17-year-old Ken McGregor, who went on to play 158 games, serviceable as a centre forward between 1999 and 2008. And their crosstown rival, Port Adelaide, who Pavlich could have gone to, they instead chose 17-year-old Adam Morgan, who played only 3 games between 2002 and 2003 for Port Adelaide. So let's have a look at the career of the best ever pick number 4 in the VFL/AFL draft, Matthew Pavlich. 353 games, 700 goals, 6-time best and fairest with the Dockers, 6-time All-Australian. 8-time leading goal kicker, 9 seasons as captain, 3-time Ross Glendenning medalist. And this is what separates him from the rest, as far as I'm concerned. All-Australian at both ends of the ground as a key position player. All-Australian as a fullback, then All-Australian as a centre-half forward. Pavlich also became the first player from Western Australia-based club to reach 300 AFL games. Absolute superstar. So far, Dangerfield 10, Pike 9, Bartel 8, Selwood 7, Macrae 6, Franklin 5, and Pavlich 4. And let's rework that. Drum roll. All right. Pike 10, Macrae 9, Bartel 8. This is where it's starting to get really difficult because that's one hell of a record. It's one hell of a record for Matthew Pavlich. But for me, he goes up from 4 to 7. Dangerfield goes to 6, Franklin 5, Selwood 4. Pike, Macrae, Bartel, Pavlich, Dangerfield, Franklin, Selwood. Tell me what you think. Have I got it right? I'd love to know your thoughts. Speak soon.